Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this special edition of All Access AM on this Tuesday, reacting to the national championship game of the college football playoff coming to an end with Indiana winning 27-21 over Miami in Hard Rock Stadium. It was a heartbreak for the Hurricanes at Hard Rock. I'm Billy Embody. This is All Access AM. We appreciate you guys being with us here as the night has now turned into Tuesday morning, recording my thoughts, my instant reaction to the national championship game. As you guys are watching this on our All Access AM channels, it's pre-recorded, but it is now what I have as my instant reaction to the national championship game. And I'll be in the chat here with you guys chatting about it. If you guys want to engage, I'll be responding to comments throughout the show. So keep that in mind as I might not respond right away. I'll be typing, but I have a bunch of thoughts on this game. I watched a ton of Miami football this year. They were one of the massive storylines going into the ACC this year. What would Miami do in response to Cam Ward leaving the program, not meeting expectations, changes at the defensive coordinator position, new quarterback in Carson Beck coming in, some really talented freshmen coming in, some key returners, a revamped defense through the transfer portal? What would this Miami team accomplish? And for the first half of the season, things looked to be going incredibly well. Then they had the hiccups against Louisville, against SMU, and then they rolled off an incredible run to reach the national championship game in their home stadium. And they come up just short, had a chance to win the game at the end and kind of cement a truly special moment in college football history if Carson Beck and company could have marched down the field in Hard Rock Stadium and gotten that national championship win with that final drive. But it was not to be. Jamari Sharp intercepted Carson Beck in the final minute, and that sealed a perfect season for the Indiana Hoosiers. Who would have thought going into this season that Indiana, with Fernando Mendoza, the Cal transfer quarterback, a Miami native, coming into the program, winning the Heisman Trophy, reeling off a perfect season. Kurt Cignetti and his staff just got a little bit more out of his team than Mario Cristobal did on this Monday night, MLK Day. And that has now turned into Tuesday morning as I'm recording this. So we've got a bunch of reaction here for you guys. And this is an ACC podcast, not going to apologize for that. And it will be largely talking about Miami, talking about what's next. How do the Hurricanes, continue this path? Maybe who could represent the ACC as well next year? Some teams to watch, at least with some of the offseason moves that these teams have put together. And of course, Miami will be in that mix. But mainly, this will be national championship reaction. And it might end up being a shorter show of All Access AM because it is solely going to be this reaction. But I've thought it was obviously important to get you guys my thoughts as quickly as possible on All Access AM, presented by our friends at OPW Solutions. We're live Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, normally 7 to 8 a.m. Central, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern time. I'm Billy Embody. We talk college football, college basketball, all centered really around the ACC on this show. So if you like that, hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel, All Access AM, and support the show, please. We've had a lot of success for us over the past week or so with some of the shows, the preview content, and of course, reacting to Darian Mensah, who could very well be the next Miami quarterback that we'll talk about here later on in the show. But we've had a bunch of growth on the podcast. We appreciate you guys joining us. Do want to remind you guys, before we get into full game breakdown, OPW Solutions is your solution for your commercial services needs for your company, whether that be commercial landscaping, whether that be power washing, snow and ice control, parking lot services, Christmas lights, fence maintenance, and more. Our friends at OPW Solutions can hook it up for you guys. Give them a call, 214-444-2305. You can email them, info@opwsolutions.com. They deal with you with integrity, reliability, and care. That's what they dish out. They're fully insured and bonded, of course, with many, many years in the industry, putting together great work for you guys that need those type of services for companies across North Texas into Oklahoma, Arkansas, and soon expanding into different locations in the Southeast. So important for you guys if you're Miami fan listening right now, give them a call, see if they're in your area yet, and see what they can do for you. They're great supporters of the ACC and of course All Access AM. So we're thankful to have them. I leave this national championship game, first of all, feeling a little thankful that this was as good of a game as I could have hoped for. And despite Miami, trailing 10-0 at the half, it was an incredible second half in particular, and a lot of intrigue from that first half, and a lot of missed opportunities for Miami. There's no question about it. And moments that we will look back on in college football history that will, of course, have delivered the ultimately a national championship for Indiana, but also a lot of what ifs for Miami. I look at how Miami was kind of able to weather a little bit of a storm there for a moment. I thought early on, you start off the game, you get the ball and you open with a 8-yard, 8 or 9 yard Mark Fletcher run to start. And I'm thinking, okay, as we talked about on the prediction show, I love this. The Miami offensive line can establish themselves early. They have that size advantage. And to an extent, they did that. They established themselves. 232 passing yards for Miami in the game, 110 rush yards, though. Just really, not good enough consistently. But also, we'll get into play calling because, of course, everybody loves to talk about play calling. And if you're a Canes fan, I'm sure you're talking about play calling, particularly in the first half, because it cost Miami. It did. It cost Miami in a big way. But Indiana outrushes them 131 yards to 110 in the end. And they were a little bit more consistent with that duo of Black and Hemby, totaling 100 and, 40-ish yards between the two of them. Just doing that job. Mark Fletcher had that 57-yard touchdown run in the second half that really gave Miami some life. And you're thinking, okay, they can do this. And then at the end of the day, he also only had 17 carries for 112 yards. Probably an indictment on how Miami called this game. Shannon Dawson had some things that worked. They were able to get going in the second half from an offensive standpoint. Put up 21 points in that second half and certainly did their part in that regard. But if you look back at the first half, it really was a missed opportunity for Miami. It felt like the Ole Miss game against a team that could take advantage of those mistakes in a sense, or of those doors that were left open for Indiana in this ball game to kind of kick that door down and build a 10-0 lead. And, Miami comes up snake eyes on the field goal at the end of the first half. I've got thoughts on special teams as well. And for Miami, I thought going into this game and for the first quarter, I thought, okay, Miami is going to have the special teams advantage. I felt like with the Miami defense forcing a couple of punts, I thought Miami right off the bat, they started with that nice Mark Fletcher, run. They had Malachi Toney involved early. They were kind of on the move. They got out to midfield and then they, stalled and, had a nice punt that pinned Indiana deep. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, we're going to watch this field position battle kind of go. And Indiana kind of goes 4 and out, that quick first down and then ended up stalling. And then Miami punts it right back after a 3 and out. And that was where Indiana goes on a 12-play, 55-yard drive to get a field goal. So they go up 3-0. I'm sitting there saying, okay, you've kind of weathered the storm. You've weathered some emotion and you find yourself down 3-0 here toward the end of the first quarter. And Miami then goes out there, and I am a huge proponent of watching play callers right after. And I don't want to say hold it against them by any means, but I will watch them in terms of their ability or inability to recognize how badly their defense, and whether it be, the just whatever circumstance, but how badly their defense needs a break, needs a run call on first down, for example. And Miami comes out and runs 3 straight pass plays and goes backwards. And then they punt it right back to Indiana. And to Miami's defensive credit, they step up and force a 3 and out. Then what does Miami do? And funny enough, this is kind of one of those interesting things where they come out in that second quarter for this drive, and they end up running the ball and get a little short pass to CJ Daniels involved, and then you get a 3rd and 2, and you're thinking, okay, here we go. And Miami can't get it. No gain, stuffed. And, it was Chamar Brown in the game. I wonder, you've got to maybe get Mark Fletcher in there. He obviously wasn't out there very long the previous offensive drive. So maybe get him back out there on that 3rd and 2. But really, the way he hit that hole, Chamar Brown on that run, it just was dead to rights. And you can talk about Indiana stunting that so well, but the lane was there on that motion, that Miami could have had a little kick out block. So I don't know what the film room would have really dove into on that and kind of dictated. But I was watching the game, and they had the sky cam right behind it. And I sat back there and I was like, he just hit the wrong hole or what? Because it was a good call in the end for Indiana. That was the one that they really, stuffed. But also missed opportunity there again for Miami. Some of the critical situations that they had, missed opportunities for Miami. And then that's when the dam broke and Miami gives up a touchdown drive. They give up that methodical 14 play, 85-yard drive. And again, you were sitting there saying, okay, Indiana's got the ball at their own 25. You're not sitting in bad field position. You're kind of doing a good job in that respect of winning that battle. And I thought that was something that Miami can kind of hold on to. I thought Miami did not play as far as execution wise, and this is a story of these two programs kind of side by side. Kind of the issue I would say that hurt Miami in the regular season losses, and then came back just enough tonight in this national championship game to cost them in the end, but just not enough perfect execution out of this Miami team when they needed it most. You get into a 3rd down situation, and there were I believe 2 of them on this drive on my notes, and you get into that situation where and Indiana was running a lot of the stop routes as Chris Fowler called them, the easy access throws that Fernando Mendoza had right along the sideline. You're giving those up, and Miami was playing super soft in that regard. But I was okay with it because really you're trying to keep everything in front. You're trying to bet on your defensive line to get home and make plays. And in the second half, we really saw that took over in a sense for Miami, especially in that second quarter where Fernando Mendoza had 3 sacks. And those were on all 3 of his dropbacks at one point in the second half, and you didn't see him get into any sort of rhythm in the second half. So you're betting that okay, if we limit them, we limit their explosives, we're going to be able to eventually get home on a sack and get home on a negative play. Miami had 6 tackles for loss. They had 3 sacks. Indiana had 1 tackle for loss and 1 sack on the night, and the sack was early in the game. And early-ish in the game. I think that was that first that 3 and out on the 3 straight pass plays that I was talking about. And instead, you get a penalty on pass interference. Frederic gets called on it, and he had kind of been handsy. He should have had an interception really on the field goal drive. It would have been a great play. It would have been a tough play to make, but those are ones you got to have at the same time as well. So they get the first down. They get into Miami territory with that. And then you're getting into a 2nd and 13. And then you're at 3rd and 12 because, Indiana did a great job of kind of mixing up a run when you're in a usual passing situation. And I think that's something that's kind of slept on nationally as far as doing, especially if you're in maybe a 4-down territory. And I would argue that at that point in the game, maybe they were. But you get to 3rd and 12. And Miami forces an incompletion. Ruben Bain, one of your veteran leaders for this Miami team, is called for an offside. And you can't do that. You can't let that happen in that situation. One, you're Ruben Bain. I know you know better. You also have the ability to not need to necessarily get that jump on an offensive tackle that you worked all night long. And that allowed the down to be replayed, 3rd and 7. And Kalen Black did what he did a lot of that night against Miami, and that was make big plays in terms of picking up first downs or having a really positive run. In this case, went for 20 yards, get down to the Miami 23, and then from there, you're just able to work enough into the Miami red zone, and then you capitalize. Indiana had 4 trips to the Miami red zone. They came away with 20 points. They went 2 for 2 as far as touchdown to field goal. They were perfect. Miami got down in the red zone once. They scored a touchdown. And, it was so, I don't want to say close, but it was close. Miami gets down there 3rd and 1. You're thinking, okay, will they get a stop defensively here and force another field goal? They don't. And Nowakowski runs it in for the 10-0 lead. And then this is where things get, you can look back on this decision and question it for Mario Cristobal. I look back on it and say, you've got to have maybe a better idea of what you're going to do in this scenario, because the next drive, Miami finally mounts an offensive attack. They go down the field. They get into Indiana territory. They're burning a good bit of clock off. Indiana's not necessarily going to get the ball back with any sort of major amount of time to make a move here. And you go 9 plays, 43 yards in 5 minutes and 40 seconds and kind of shorten the game. And it was a good thing. Defense kind of needed that. But then you shot the field goal kicker out there, Carter Davis, and he misses, right off the upright. And on a drive that I felt like Miami probably could have gone for it. Again, they had gone for it earlier and picked it up by the hair on their chinny chin chin. And they didn't. It was a longer distance, 4th and 2, but that also opens up different options. And I just wonder, obviously, Mario Cristobal is going to want that one back, and so is Carter Davis. But you had a chance and an amount of time and timeouts to maybe go out there and get a look offensively and see if you like something, and then call timeout and not necessarily, have to run a play. You could go out and see what they're going to come out in. And if you like it, then you could call timeout and say, okay, we like it. We're going to go. And I almost would have been fine with that, even though you're eating an extra timeout in a sense. But they end up going with the field goal unit. And again, off the right upright, had plenty of distance, not what you wanted. You come away down 10-0 at the half. Then your defense comes out and plays inspired football. And this is a lot of fun when Corey Heatherman and the ESPN broadcast was talking about this. The Miami defense came out and played inspired football in the second half. They really got into their bag a little bit in that third quarter, and they gave this Miami team a chance to win. They forced a punt, 6 plays, 6 yards, punt, 4 plays, 22 yards, punt, 3 plays, -2 yards. And then the next time Indiana got the ball was the fourth quarter. And so for Miami, right after they get the ball in the second half, Mark Fletcher rips off the 57-yard touchdown run. Huge play, quick drive. Then you're in the game now, 10-7. You're sitting there saying, okay, here we go. We got this. We're going to settle in and we're going to see, Miami end up, being in a really good situation. But not the case, because Miami ends up getting a blocked punt and Indiana recovers it in the end zone to make it 17-7. I said it on the preview pod going in. I felt like Miami had the better special teams, and I don't think many people would have argued with that. And instead, the execution of Indiana gets them. And Miami obviously has this happen to them. They had a couple of kind of poor punts, go against them, as well as they were trying to play the field position game, and that was kind of that backbreaker early in the third quarter that or not early in the third quarter, but in the third quarter that if you take that out, obviously, I mean, that's the difference in the game, is getting a punt block, but you back it up even more. and Malachi Tony catches the ball inside his 5. And those are things where you just you can't do it. And Indiana did it early, and it hurt them from a field position perspective. So those special teams errors were critical for Miami, and it cost them. That was the difference in the ball game. The Ruben Bain offsides was the difference in the ball game, and obviously the Carson Beck interception was what it was. But you don't even get there if you're playing a little bit cleaner of a version of yourself than you played in this national championship game against Indiana. Because at the end of the day, you did not play your best. You lost the game. Miami, I thought, showed they were more than capable of winning this game. It's unfortunate for ACC fans and Cane fans to be going home without a trophy tonight because of a few plays over the course of the game that made a difference. Let me pause here, because I'm sure if some Indiana fan has stumbled upon our video here and has made it 21 minutes and they're sitting there saying, man, all this guy is talking about is Miami and what Miami did and what Miami didn't do and what Miami didn't accomplish. Fernando Mendoza had a very, very solid game. Just solid. Nothing to write home about. Not what you'd expect from a Heisman Trophy winner. 16 of 27, 186 yards. But guess what? The only turnover of the game came from Carson Beck. Fernando Mendoza didn't turn it over. He was able to keep them in position to move the change when they needed to. And there were some few drives out there when he was getting absolutely abused. I mean, he really did get abused all night. He got hit, he got knocked around, but he showed toughness, he showed grit, and he showed everything you would have wanted in a quarterback that went into a national championship game and clearly said, I don't have to win this myself. I don't have to be the guy. I don't have to be the Heisman superhero player out here. I can let my teammates do their job. I can let my teammates make all of the things happen. Kaelon Black and Roman Hemby, had over 100 yards on the ground in a relatively shortened game from a plays perspective. I feel like. And you have a time of possession massive advantage over Miami as well. And you just took care of the ball. You did your job, and everyone else made things happen. And because of that, we were treated to a fourth quarter that featured a Mark Fletcher touchdown run, gets close, gets 17-14. And then Fernando Mendoza puts the most iconic run in Indiana football history on tape. 12-yard touchdown run, puts them up 24-14. That one comes with a little bit more than 9 minutes to play. And you're thinking, okay, the way this game has gone, it's going to be very, very tight margin right here for Miami to make this happen. What do? They mount an 8-play, 91-yard touchdown drive that ends with Malachi Tony touchdown. Awesome job by that staff to put that together and make it 24-21. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, and my prediction, I went, I think 24-20, something like that, picked Miami. So I'm tracking pretty well on the actual point total here. And you end up kind of looking back on it and you're just saying, okay, Miami made mistakes that I didn't account for. A Ruben Bain offsides, a special teams blunder, because then Indiana goes down and really kind of bleeds the clock down, but they come away with a field goal, 27-21 with, 142 to go. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, Miami will have a shot. Will this be the Carson Beck back-to-back, heroics that he showed against Ole Miss to punch their ticket? But the final score was in the final moments, like I kind of predicted there loosely, but it was not with the drama of that touchdown run over Ole Miss. It was a field goal for Indiana that made the difference in the game, just enough for Miami to overcome, and they had to press. Think about this. If they were to have made that field goal, and I still think they should have gone for it to end the half, you're looking at a situation where they don't have to press. They have tons of time. You're playing for overtime in a sense, but you can also take some opportunities to maybe try some different things to maybe win it in regulation. Miami just did too much to hurt themselves. I mean, that's it at the end of the day. But Indiana is a story for college football fans that they will never forget. You'll never forget Indiana's undefeated season. And by the way, the first time national champion, I believe, since 1996. So kudos to them for getting obviously over the hump. It has been an incredibly long journey for Kurt Cignetti to lead Indiana to, or for Kurt Cignetti to get to this moment. You know what he's done going from Alabama and then working his way through all of the different jobs that he's had as a head coach at lower levels, going to JMU, betting on himself, ending up at Indiana, and you know, our on three team was on site at the national championship game this week, and Pat Coogan, the starting center for the Indiana Hoosiers by way of Notre Dame, said, there's no secret sauce. It's really just about hard work. It's about this, just very simple. And Kurt Cignetti was asked about what it means to accomplish this. What does a national championship by an Indiana mean to a program that might be sitting there in college football and saying, man, we just don't have it. We don't have the ability, or we don't have the players, or we don't have the money, or we don't have this, or we don't have that. But he said something that I thought was outstanding. And I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, if you put your nose to the grindstone in this country and you work hard, anything's possible. And that was something that I think really his main point of that message. And it was a great Q&A with one of our on three team members, Ari Wasserman, and him. But to have that type of mindset that if you put your head down and you work hard and you make it about the work, you're going to be in position to have success somehow, some way, whatever that looks like. You're going to be successful, and it can happen for you. And you just have to trust that process of working hard. And Indiana, without a doubt, embodies all of that and that mindset, and how, nobody wants the spotlight in a sense. They're very quick to pass it off because they believe in each other. And that belief got them a national championship tonight. And you've got to give them a ton of credit, because they were the harder team to beat in Hard Rock Stadium. And it's heartbreaking for Miami because of that. They were harder to beat. Miami had the ability, they had the players. I thought they, if not for some, again, I think there were some issues with play calling early on. I really think this Miami offensive line would have worn down Indiana a little bit more. You saw some of the fruits of that labor running the ball the way they did, and kind of, just sticking with it early enough. I felt like if they could have done a little bit more of that, we would have seen a lot more in the second half. It would have looked like Mark Fletcher kind of against Ole Miss, kind of against, some of these teams we've seen throughout the year where they were really able to lean on them and move the line of scrimmage. So just disappointing if you're a Cane fan. That is just what stands out to me. You've got to just be heartbroken, but that you had a season that was just incredible, and one that is going to be very memorable for what they were able to do, and what they were able to do to put Miami in position now to be this year in, year out national title contender. We always talked about having thoughts of it, but now they can really envision it at a high level. So we'll continue on here with reaction. But speaking of high level, we have a high level partner with us at the La La Land Foundation. And what they do is just so special. And to help the youth of America that are transitioning from the foster care system into adulthood, and helping them make decisions and do all of the things that most of us already know through our experiences in life or going to college or whatever. There are so many ways the La La Land Foundation is helping these people get ready to go into that next phase of life and do it with confidence. And the ability to support people that way is built on kindness, and kindness from others can take many different forms, whether it be monetary donations, in-kind donations, corporate sponsorships. Please reach out to go to lalalandfoundation.com and research that on how to get your company involved. You can also volunteer your time and offer up mentor opportunities as well. The La La Land Foundation is a great organization. Go to the links in our podcast episode description and below this video as well to learn more about how you can get to work with the La La Land Foundation today and help normalize kindness. That's what they do. Miami, couldn't have been kinder in a sense in letting Indiana finish this thing off and do it in a incredible way with the ability to execute in the clutch and make the plays that were needed. But it is not kind at all to think about this Miami team and what's next for it in these early moments after this. But I do have some thoughts here for in just a little bit on Miami and kind of what's next year, because there's a lot that's going to come rather quickly for this Miami Hurricanes program as they turn the page from a lot of these really, really, really good players that they've had on this roster. But I do want to say Carson Beck and play calling in this game. And I don't enjoy being play calling guy because I think it's kind of lazy in a sense, but that's why I've also put it all the way 30 minutes into this recap. Carson Beck, 19 of 32, 232 yards, a touchdown, and the lone interception on that final drive. And that ball just kind of came out weird for whatever reason and was easily intercepted by Jamari Sharp. I thought they had enough time that I just didn't like taking the shot like that. But especially the way Malachi Tony had kind of done some different things over the middle. But it was at the point where, they had to press a little bit here. They had to score a touchdown. Miami did cover. So let's, obviously give them kudos for that. A lot of people were picking a more dominant Indiana final score in a sense. But I was pretty confident Miami would show up and play well and give themselves a chance to win a national championship. And they did. They just did not play at a high enough level, I think, offensively for me when I evaluate this game. Obviously, special teams getting a punt block, they have to feel the brunt of this when you're sitting in that locker room and you lost by 6 and you gave up a punt block, touchdown, scoop and score. Like you have to be feeling that in the worst way right now if you're a Hurricane on that special teams unit. But I felt like the game plan, and Kirk Herbstreit said it, I think, or maybe midway through the second quarter, was right after that. I think it was right after that second 3 and out that ended up leading to the Indiana touchdown drive. Yeah, touchdown drive. He said they're going to stick to the game plan. And I was like, whoa, throw that thing out. And, I don't know if this is where Kirk Herbstreit has just a little bit too much on the table or whatever going on, but the game plan for Miami should have been an incredible amount of Mark Fletcher in this ball game. And they did not get enough. Through the first quarter, 5 carries. Through the first half, he ended up having 12, or there were 12 rushes as a whole. It's kind of hard to break down the box score here overall on my stat sheet, but he ends up with 17 carries, and Chamar Brown comes in and gets 3, and then that's it. I have a huge issue with that. To have, let's see, to have 53 offensive plays, and it's not like you had a bad game as far as production. You had 6.5 yards per play, but you take out that 57-yard touchdown run by Mark Fletcher, and the numbers look pretty different. You'd be held to under 300 yards. Obviously, the play happened. I'm not trying to rewrite history here, but you had a major play that is the only reason why you were over 100 yards on the ground. But your star running back from Miami, who was running with physicality and against a difficult front, I was impressed with what Indiana was able to do up front. But your big name Miami guy in Mark Fletcher, and he only gets the rock 17 times. I think there is a difficult task at times for coaches when something isn't working in a sense from a statistical perspective. 16 carries, you take So 16 carries, you take out the 57 yarder. I mean, you're looking at kind of tough sledding numbers in a sense. But I felt like watching the game and watching it unfold, it looked a little bit better than it ended up being from a production standpoint. You think about some of those tackles. I remember one, I think it was a block by a CJ Daniels or a Malachi Tony, and he works over the Indiana defender and he pancakes him, and the guy's leg just trips up Mark Fletcher. He had more green grass ahead. There are a lot of moments over the course of this game that I felt like Mark Fletcher was just shy of breaking a big one. And if you stick with it, some of those things can reveal themselves in a more critical situation, maybe when you needed it at other moments. But instead they got away from it just a little too much. Obviously, that final drive will skew things just a little bit more for Carson Beck in a sense, but that's still there too. But I think with the limited amount of plays you ended up running offensively, you could have set up your team a little bit better to win the time of possession. They lose the time of possession 36-24 to 30 to 23-36. And that's disappointing when you have an offensive line that significantly outweighed and outsized the Indiana front. And I felt like Indiana schemed things up well. They played fundamentally sound. They played hard. They did all of those things. I still am just right there with the fact that they could have run the ball and they could have turned it out a little bit more. So I took a little bit of issue with the general distribution of the ball in terms of run versus pass. And I think it really came back to bite Miami. I think the end of the half, if not for Miami's offense figuring that out to get that field goal attempt, I think Indiana would have gone right down the field and scored and made it 17-0 going in the half. That is how tired I think the Miami defense was getting in the first half. It was unbelievable to watch those two scoring drives that Indiana had in that half, and you're sitting there thinking, oh boy, this is ugly. The time of possession was 18:09 to 11:51. Not terrible, but pretty scary as well. The third quarter was a little bit better for Miami. They were able to win the time of possession, and you look at what happened. They ran the ball 7 times, and they went 10 passes. So still like a fairly high number of passes, but not anything that was crazy, not anything that was over the top. Consistent with what they did in the second quarter, or not in the second quarter, but in the first half, they had 10 total passes. They ran the ball 12 times. They got away from the run. And that's just where it's disappointing for me from a play calling perspective. And you know what? Talking heads, like every now and again, we do see things, and it is obvious to all of us outside of a building that is the recipe for success, and we hone in and harp and drill it into our audience's minds that X team has to do X, Y, Z to win the game. And for this one going into it, everyone was talking about Mark Fletcher. His mom got a bunch of shout outs whenever he touched the ball. We knew that Mark Fletcher and this Miami run game had to be the reason why this Miami team wins the national championship. They would have kept the defense fresher. Think about some of the plays that were made by this Miami defense. Think about if they were a little bit fresher because they weren't on the field as much, or they had a little bit more time on the sidelines. Those things seem like very, very, very obvious decisions to make. And in the first half, you shot yourself in the foot. And that was why you were down 10-0 to an extent. But you had set just enough of a precedence that you were going to run the ball. And you came out in the third quarter, which includes the big long touchdown run, and you ran it seven times. You end up getting that big run, and Mark Fletcher was truthfully looking like he was kind of starting to hit his stride. And I thought it was really trending in the right direction. But then by the end of the fourth quarter, it was just not to be. They only ran it 2 times in the fourth quarter. It's just crazy. And I know they were playing a little bit of catch up because of a fun special teams error in sense, but you have to sometimes know that there's a ton of time in this game. Even against a team like Indiana, I felt like Miami let that slip away just a little too much. Finally, uh, uh, penalties 7 for 60. Indiana got a unsportsmanlike on Jamari Sharp, took off his helmet after the interception. That factored in. I don't know how many yards exactly, but generally a clean game from Indiana. Both defenses were very good on third downs. Miami's held Indiana's to 6 of 15. Indiana held Miami to 3 of 11. Really, really rough stuff on third down for Miami. It was kind of a nightmare zone for them. They were able to convert 1 fourth down on the day, but when you have that type of inefficiency on third down, you got to look back at it and you got to say, what was the issue? And I'm still going to sit here and say that they did not stick to what it seemed like was the obvious game plan to set up success on third downs and get them in third and short, third and maybe light medium in a sense. They didn't do that. There was another drive that it might have even been the field goal drive where I'm sitting there watching it. I'm like, I can't believe they're doing XYZ. They've got enough time to kind of make a different decision here with the football, but they didn't, and it ended up costing them because they just couldn't get close enough. So it was a really good college football game. Really good college football game. I enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed watching every second of it. For an ACC podcast, you wish that we were sitting here having an incredible time talking about how cool of a story it is that Miami is on top of the college football world again, and they were able to knock off an undefeated team from the Big Ten, and the ACC's got its chest puffed out a little bit more. But here's the thing. Miami showed what roster construction still means to college football today, how important it is, and that you can do it with homegrown guys, a lot of high school guys on this Miami team. You can do it with bringing guys back from the area that are transfers. You can do it with some 5 stars. You can do it with some high-end spending. And there's no doubt about that. And Indiana is going to be in the high-end spending range here very, very soon with all the investments they're making. But you have a Miami team that has a really bright future under Mario Cristobal. They just now enter an offseason where they have a lot of questions. I'm not going to sit here and be concerned about the direction of Miami now because of what we saw. We saw them push through and get over the hump in so many ways this season. When SMU beat Miami, by the way, Kevin Jennings, shout out to him, had a really good day against Miami, passing the ball a little bit better than Fernando Mendoza. Between Miami and with Darian Mensah probably and Kevin Jennings, the ACC is going to have 2 of the better quarterbacks coming back nationally. But you look at what Miami did entering November, and you're thinking, I can't believe they lost the first game in November again this year with the team that they have. Like you were thinking, okay, maybe the Louisville game was an anomaly with the 4 interceptions, but no, then they go and lose to SMU. And a good SMU team that was close to being in Charlotte just did not handle critical situations well. Truthfully, they did not. And that's why they were on the outside of the college football playoff as well. But Miami loses that game and they say, okay, not again. We're going to go take it out on all of these teams. And they go on a run and they show that Mario Cristobal can motivate, can put his team in position with the talent and play calling and staff around them and all the support people in that building to go on a big run. They've proven that this league is tough, number one, and that was a huge piece to this playoff run for Miami. The ACC is a tough league. So when you see teams struggle and you see bowl-eligible teams give other really good bowl-eligible teams a tough time like Louisville and SMU did to Miami, guess what? It's not, oh man, Louisville, Miami, like Louisville beat Miami or SMU beat Miami. No, it's a depth of the league that doesn't get talked about enough because you have Big 12 teams that don't play anyone in non-conference play. They don't tee that up. So they can kind of inflate their schedules naturally. You look at the Big 10 and what they're doing right now in college football is outstanding. I would still argue the Big 10 might end up getting even more top heavy than the SEC in the coming years. Keep an eye on that. And the SEC's top of the top is, I think facing an issue where there is, and I don't want to say laziness, but I'll say it laziness as far as how they evaluate certain pieces of their organizations from a player and a coaching perspective. And I've long said this, when you look at transfers out from SEC programs, you look at a guy who started off his high school run, and this happens a lot, started off his high school run as a super highly rated guy, ends up being a 4-star because he signs, in part with an SEC. You're going to give a lot of guys the benefit of the doubt. I mean, you don't want to sit there and be like, as an evaluator, like, I've seen this kid so much because he's been on the upper echelon of camps and I've seen him play in person multiple times. And I just can't put my finger on it, what I don't like about him as much as I did earlier in his career. But I don't want to be wrong, and I don't want to, drop him to a 3-star unless I'm sure. That guy ends up going to an SEC school somewhere else because they were a highly touted guy with big offers. And some of these schools are still signing those type of players instead of signing big risers, and instead of finding the gems in that bottom of the class that end up making the roster what it is. I think there's some laziness in that regard in the SEC. They've got to fix that. They've got to get a little bit better, not at evaluating because they're very good, but you've got to find players that really can develop still. And those players can have time to develop, because you should have enough depth built to allow that to happen. The ACC, I think, is moving in the right direction in a number of instances with teams like Virginia Tech. You look at what SMU's done. Louisville had a really nice portal class. Look at what Cal's doing. There are so many reasons why this league is going to continue to get better. And that's also by saying that Clemson has work to do. FSU has work to do. NC State, North Carolina, they've got work to do still. But a lot of these programs are investing and trying to make things happen that makes this league tough week in, week out. And I think the ACC has really good coaching. I really think that is something that you cannot account for. I think you go up and down the schedule, you say, oh, wow, okay, you've got to deal with so-and-so at quarterback who creates issues. You've got to deal with such and such defensive coordinator who, really likes to dial things up and has an interesting front. There's so many different pieces of this league that make it really difficult to prepare for versus some of the just star smashings against each other of talent acquisition and only recruiting star or transfer portal star talent acquisition. It's a fine line to get it right. So Miami has figured that out. They were, and I do think to an extent, maybe an Xavier Lucas missing the first half maybe hurt just a little bit, but you also have a team that end up showing a little bit more of exactly who Miami was this year. They were a very penalized team nationally. They knew that Carson Beck needed to be a game manager, and they kind of put it a little bit more on him in this national championship game, I felt like. And that was something that we kind of thought, okay, there's no way they're going to do that going into this game, but they did. So you've got to give credit for Indiana and how they executed and took advantage, but you've got to also sit here and say Miami has an incredibly bright future. They just have a lot of things they have to fix for next season. Miami has to go get a quarterback. Darian Mensah is the hot name. Miami loses Ruben Bain. I believe they lose Akeem Mesidor as well. They lose some of these veteran defensive linemen, and they lose Francis Mauigoa, and they lose some of the other key pieces to this team. And they're going to load up in the portal, and they're going to do all of those things, and they're going to have their staff back, it looks like. Shannon Dawson, Corey Heatherman, of course, Mario Cristobal at the helm. But that is a lot to replace as well. So this ACC, it can be wide open again. It does run through Miami, make no mistake. And they put on a special college football playoff run that I hope everybody enjoys and appreciates for what it was. And that was just an incredible run and really fun to cover and to watch up close and watch every second of it as Miami is here, as Mario Cristobal likes to say. And they're going to be here for a long time now with that group at the helm and what they've been able to put together. So a heck of a national championship game. We will have more portal coverage. We will have more basketball coverage on a podcast later this week, maybe Thursday, maybe Friday. This is a weird week with travel for me. So stay tuned. I'm going to try to record something for Thursday morning in our usual spot, but all the more reason for you to subscribe to the channel, scan the QR code in the corner that just popped up, and you will be able to turn on alerts as well so that you know when we're going live. That's something I always recommend so you don't miss anything. But please support the channel, All Access AM. Support our sponsors as well. You've got two great sponsors, OPW Solutions and the La La Land Foundation on this show, but we've got a whole group of them that make this show happen. So we're really appreciative of them. And we're so excited to take this show to the next level. Drop in the comment section as well what you want to see in the offseason now that we're here for football. We'll talk a lot of basketball. We've got that covered. Don't worry. But we're going to dive into portal classes. We're going to dive into recruiting, a bunch of different storylines around what's next for every program in the ACC. We might drop like a special episode once a week that is, in our time slot where we'll look at one program. Maybe we'll get a special guest on for each and all of those things. So really looking forward to diving into this with all of you guys in the off season. So looking forward to what we can build on with this All Access AM show covering ACC football, ACC basketball, college sports, and more. But I'm Billy Embody. Hope you guys enjoy the national championship game. Canes fans, you have a lot to be proud of. And we hope to see you guys on All Access AM moving forward. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe, like, rate, and review, and we'll catch you next time. 27-21. Indiana is your national champion over Miami. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time, everyone.